think we're gonna have plenty of chairs. Hi, Matt. Good. Hi, everyone who's able to make it tonight. Thank you very much. My name is Brian Conley. I am Boundaries and Planning Director for Salt Lake City School District. I've got some help tonight. My pinch hitter is Steve Hogan, who you're going to meet in just a moment. Steve's going to do the majority of the talking because I haven't learned how to talk without drooling a lot yet with my wired jaw. Had a bicycle accident and set me back a few weeks, but I'm learning how to get it going again. You don't have to look at my trach hole anymore. You don't have to look at my big swollen head that was this big. So those parts, hopefully, as I continue to get better, you'll have to listen to me this fall when we're doing community meetings again. But in the meantime, I sure appreciate Steve's help tonight. We also have Brandon who's helping out, and both Yandri and Jason, thank you for both being here from our communications department. And we're going to go ahead and get started. The first about, I'm going to say roughly 25, 30 minutes of time is going to be some, hopefully some new information and some learning from you. And after that, we'll be open to questions, comments. A lot of my time is going to be just trying to capture any of those questions or comments people have that I can then share with the board members. So this is Steve Hogan, and I'll just turn the time over to him.
Thanks for coming. Yeah, Steve Hogan. I'm helping out as really a consultant for Salt Lake City School District for a little while. Brian's been humble. He said it was a bike accident, but I think it was the first boundary meeting you had, right? Well, that happened. So I'm just teasing how seriousness he. I had texted Brian a few weeks ago just to ask, hey, how are things going? And it took 2 or 3 days to get back because that's when he was things up pretty good. So glad to help and glad to be here. So how many? So who do we have represented? I know we have some folks from Salt Lake District, of course. Are you guys from parents or patrons from a particular school?
Parents from Wasatch.
From Wasatch. Great, great. So welcome. Again, you'll notice, and you'll see it on the slide again at the end, there are, I think, 4 or 5, Brian, meetings over the next week or so. I think 4. And, of course, you're welcome at any of those or all of them if you want to be at any of them. So I'll go through this kind of quickly. If you want me to go back at any point and go over these slides, I'll do my best to do that, and Brian can help fill in the gaps. Okay? District reconfiguration, long-term school closures. A fancy title. Sorry.
Our translator had a
Hey. Let me know. By the way, I'm trying to keep this simple. It's simply the who, what, where, when, why, how of the district management process. Okay? So, I'm gonna tend to direct most of mine, and I'm sorry.
I just teach over there.
Okay, fantastic. So I'll direct a lot of my attention to you guys, but if you need my attention, raise your hand and speak up, and I'll be glad to look all over it. So, we've known for years, a lot of people have known for years that schools can be too big around the country, especially the last couple of decades in the 80s and 90s. In this valley, we saw schools that were year-round. They were on non-traditional schedules, doing all sorts of things because we had so many students who were trying to accommodate. We're an older, more mature state and even district now. Some things are changing. So at one point, again, we know we had schools that were too large, and that was a problem. Well, Schools that are too small can also be a problem. There is typically a kind of a sweet spot that districts are trying to hit with that for better outcomes and better opportunities for students. That's the bottom line. That really is what we're focusing on. So, with that in mind, this is what Salt Lake City School District is focusing on are these. But if I were to encapsulate these, I would say the same thing about outcomes and opportunities for the students and their families. For quality district programs, like I mentioned, and access, educator learning, collaboration, so that we reflect best practices and best teaching. Fiduciary responsibility, the money. Some people have asked us, quite frankly, and we'll tell you right in the first few minutes of this meeting, I get this all the time, is, hey, is this about money? Well, that's part of it, but that's certainly not the only reason. In fact, I'll tell you it's not the first reason. The first reason that these things are considered, again, are about student outcomes and opportunities. Down the line, and I'll show you a list in a minute, about, of course, there are fiscal responsibilities that the district board members owe the taxpayers. And sustainability and environmental responsibility. More about the buildings. What are the buildings capable of? So again, the history I alluded to a minute ago. This is specific to Salt Lake City School District. Approximately 25,000 students 10 years ago. That's gone down. Almost 4,500, or about 18%, just in the last 10 years. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, but I believe it's still, trend line is down a little bit in the next few years. In fact, is that, there we go. And is this the elementary? These are K-6 students?
Yeah.
From 13,000 down to 10,000, almost another 3,000 students over the next several years. So if that was, sorry, 14 to 22, that was currently.
Yeah, and then over the next 5 years, it's still gonna go down, but it levels off a lot. We're only expected to lose about 250 students over the next 4 years.
And I can tell you this is the general trend around the Salt Lake Valley, is the same thing that I've seen in other districts that I've looked at, is that we're still trending down for a few years. That will level off, but it's going to take 2 or 3 more years. Okay? Now, these things are impacted, by the way, the 3 main things that are impacting our enrollment. One, we're just an older, more mature district, valley, state in general. This is a nationwide trend where birth rates are down. Within Utah, when we talk about birth rates, and we're still higher than most states, but we're down significantly. The Kim C. Gardner Institute had a report out recently that details this with volumes of information about our, as a state, and the valleys, Salt Lake Valley's birth rate. There are other considerations, charter schools, private schools that are more prevalent than before. That's having an impact. And then mobility, students coming and going, migration, out-migration. Those are the 3 main factors that most districts consider. The process is driven by 2 main factors, state statute and board policy. State statute, you may have seen some of those recently in a few districts trying to understand how to best go through the process. But state statute is typically about timelines and communication. And without going into too much detail, again, I can come back to this, but I'm trying to keep it simple for this meeting. It's about timelines. Certain things have to be done at certain times. That's mostly what this meeting is about, to help you understand what those timelines are and that process is for Salt Lake City. Again, the other thing that is board policy. I'm not going to read that, but what I will tell you is it basically covers these items. Those are, I want to make sure this is very clear. At least these 12 considerations, and in smaller font in no particular order. And sometimes I wonder if we shouldn't put that in larger font, because it's really important. Some people say, well, is this just about the smallest school out there, the lowest enrollment? Is it just about the building? Is it just about how old the building is? No one of those things is the most important. In fact, every study is different, every area, every school, every community is different. And in the studies I've been involved in over the last 10 years approximately. It's borne out over and over that every study is different. Sometimes certain characteristics rise to the top. But typically, for most studies, it's a combination of all of these. You just have to look at all of these, and the options committee, the board, has the very difficult job of trying to put all these factors in the pot and decide which ones are most important to the district. So again, facility capacity, design, the condition of the building, feeder patterns, state laws, demographics, community input, all of those are all important. And this just goes into detail with a few. Again, community input, that's what we're here for tonight. And by the way, I'll stay as long as you want to. I don't know how long the meeting was advertised to stay, but even after the meeting, because it's important that you feel like you're getting questions answered. And if we're here till 10 o'clock or whatever, you stop at the library, I'm glad to stay and answer your questions. Transportation, there could be transportation issues, safe walking routes. This is a large suburban school district, urban district. There are a lot of things going on, and student safety is obviously at the top. The demographics. Again, you can see this is, I can tell you that I'm sure Salt Lake City School District, as well as other districts in the area, are proud of the demographics, excited to serve their communities. These are the communities that we serve. You can see different percentages there representing.
When I've gone to individual schools, we just shared this information specific for each school. This does represent our entire district.
Again, some of the things we talked about in more detail: facilities, geographic features of the district, special programs, very important. Every district has to decide what programs they want to emphasize, what they value. That's all part of the process. Financial, we need to have the right number of schools for the number of classes of students we have. The number one consideration, but absolutely it should be a consideration. Now, a lot of you have probably heard about a state legislative audit that was done this past year. And these are just a couple of the highlights that are listed here. By the way, I believe this entire presentation PowerPoint will soon be on the district website, correct?
Yeah.
So if there's something you want to look at more closely, or you'll remember once you get home and you want to view it, it will be published on the Salt Lake City website soon. Salt Lake City Board of Education should evaluate possible elementary schools for permanent closure. You know, it's one thing to know it as a district. When I've worked in other districts, I felt confident in the data, in the anecdotal and hard data that we've had. But sometimes you want to confirm that data or challenge that data. Now, I believe, Brian, that Salt Lake City School District had hired a consultant, just like other districts have, and they had hired Davis Demographics. Legislative audits can be tough, but the good thing about them is you take away what you think is important for the district, and out of that is, hey, yeah, I think it's time, according to that audit, for the district to consider closures based on the data they have. There goes batteries and can you manually move that while I,
Yep.
without my glasses, trying to get this back together?
Brandon, I'll help you out.
Let's see if we can get it to repair. Right. Works. So that's just simply what we're saying. So right size or right sizing, finding the right size for each grade in each elementary school. One of the main points of emphasis that I want you to understand, and I'll spend as much time as you want me on it, but we can come back to it. Best practice that we've seen over and over, not just throughout the district, the state, but if you look nationally, like I said earlier, schools can be too large, they can be too small. A especially in the elementary schools, we found that a minimum of 3 teachers per grade level, the minimum of 3 teachers per grade level is typically the goal. Now, 4 to 5 teachers per grade level can be even better. Now, of course, that's based on the size of the building itself, the capacity, and the design of the building. But that really is, in essence, what we're saying here. 3 teachers per grade level, you can do certain things. When your school gets too small, one thing that we hear often, confusion out there, is that the smaller the school, the smaller the classrooms, class size, fewer students per class. It's simply not true. Schools are funded based on the ratio of number of students. If you have more students, you get more teachers. If you have fewer students, you get fewer teachers. In fact, what happens in schools with only 1, sometimes 2 teachers per grade level is you get a lot of imbalance. You'll perhaps get 1 large class and 1 small class. It's just human nature. It just happens. If you get a favorite teacher, where a lot of things can happen, but you typically get larger imbalances. And the closer you can get to 3, 4, maybe even 5 teachers per grade level, the more you can balance those numbers out. And a lot of other things happen too. So the choice for students and families. If you've been a parent and there's only one choice, maybe 1 teacher per grade level, challenge. You get what you get, right? And even with 2, that can be a challenge. Trying to find the right fit for your student where the best outcomes happen. The more teachers you have up to that 3, 4, 5 range, better outcomes we've seen over and over. Special focus programs such as dual language immersion. Do we have any dual language parents here? Is this going to mess up? You're not going to see me quite come to the side, are you? Gifted and talented with dual language specifically, which is very popular. However, that changes the dynamic. You almost, quite frankly, need 4 to 5 teachers per grade level to really run an efficient program in elementary for dual language. Because it's like having a school in school. You have 1, more, hopefully 2 DLI or dual language immersion classes per grade level. Well, if you have 2, then you have 1 traditional class, you're back to that same issue. Even though you have a lot of students with that program, you have most students with the 1 teacher, and that works for a lot of students, perhaps not for all the students. So it can create challenges. Again, it's been another hour just on that issue alone. Space available for your music and other programs. Without portables, hopefully. Make sure I did this one. Apologize. Minimize teachers having to teach split classes. So much of what happens in elementary is about collaboration. Split grade level, we have some amazing teachers out there, and we get some amazing results. But it's not ideal, even for the best of teachers, to be in a split grade level classroom where you have 1st and 2nd grade, 2nd, 3rd, 3rd and 4th, and so on. Again, great, but it's not ideal. Most any teacher will tell you, you can focus on 1 grade level at a time. We're going to get better results. Okay? And then finding a better balance between our district standard programs and unique neighborhood programs. It should be that way. It should be that way where communities and neighborhoods get to choose or have some voice in which programs are in those schools. That happens, or it happens a lot easier if the school is a little larger. If you notice, what I'm kind of getting at here is an economy of scale. Again, say the same thing. Too large, too small. There's a kind of a Goldilocks syndrome here where it gets at least closer to just right, where there's an economy of scale that starts to take place at a certain size. By the way, does that mean that if your child happens to be in a small class or large class, a small school or large school, or something out of the ordinary, or even a 1-room schoolhouse, does that mean your child is necessarily getting a bad education and is not going to succeed? No, I want to be very clear. That's not necessarily the case, because we know 2 things almost universally, and that is whatever support they have outside of the school is typically the biggest factor. Second biggest factor is teaching, the teacher in the classroom, and then there are a lot of other factors outside of that. But in general, that's what we're talking about here. In general, for most students in most schools, best practices, best results, best outcomes come from this combination of right size. The other part to remember is a lot about teacher burnout has been real. As a former teacher, former principal, I've seen this over and over, talked to many staffs over the last 10 years on this issue. And when you have, let's say you have a small school and you have 12 teachers, only 12 teachers in a school. Well, you have the same number of committee assignments, same number of things that have to be done across the building, no matter whether you have 50 teachers or 12. What happens? Same teachers doing the same thing. You see a lot of burnout. They're trying to do everything. Same goes for parents. I'm guessing that in these meetings, we'll see some of those active parents say the same thing. They're the ones on the PTA. They are also serving on the school community council. They are also doing the fundraiser. They're also doing 4 or 5 other things. And that's hard. It's hard after a while. I've even seen some parents literally move to a new school because they don't feel like they can do that anymore, and they feel like they want to move to the other school for that support. So that's what all of that is saying. Now, what I said earlier that students or schools are funded on a per student ratio, that's for classrooms. There's another pot of money that comes also from the number of students. TSSA, trust lands, Title I funds, others we consider soft monies, state, federal monies. You use those to round out your programs, whether those are aids, special ed aids, BHAs. There is a list of about 15 different things you can do. You can increase the number of hours for a school nurse, a school psychologist, a social worker, playground duty, lunch, you name it. There are a lot of things that help a school to run more efficiently and do increase the outcomes that come from those things. Well, if you have a school of 250 students or even 300 versus a school of 700, who gets more money for those things? Per pupil. So it's coming by the number of students. Again, back to that economy of scale, nothing's perfect, but when you have more monies, you have more resources to provide for the students and teachers. That's what we're trying to say, the supportive programs. We mentioned that one, efficient use of support educators. And here's quite frankly, when we get into the financial issues, if you have a school of 300 here and a school B of 300, and you have an administrator for each one of those, a head custodian for each one of those, as principal secretary for each one of those, we have to look at a responsible use of district resources. Could those be combined? Maybe. Let's look at it. Let's examine that. And should the district board, everyone look at those? Sure, we should. We should all be as efficient as possible. Assuming, again, first of all, it's about the students and not about can we save $1. But student outcomes first. Then if we do that, as a byproduct of that, we may also save taxpayer money more wisely. Again, one ineffective classroom. I'm going to 30 seconds on this. This one drives me a little nuts. But when people move into an area, the thing they typically do is get on a computer to find out about schools. That's where we want to live, where the best schools are. But what do? They don't know people in the area. So you get on the website. You get on the state website. You find some website that says, tell me about that school. It gives you a grade. In the state of Utah, we have grades. And it's changed a little bit over the years, but it's still a little frustrating because a grade can be very misleading for a school. But what impacts that grade oftentimes is if you have, again, 10, 11, 12 teachers in a school, and 2 teachers, even 1 teacher, but especially 2 teachers are struggling. When I say struggling, I don't necessarily mean that's just a terrible person, terrible teacher. It could be a first-year teacher, and they're going to be great, but they're not there yet. Teachers have things happen. They get sick too. Teacher goes out and they get cancer or whatever, and they have to be out for a while. We don't have another full-time teacher, but we do have a long-term sub in there for 6 months. There are 18 other things that could happen. Well, again, those things affect teacher grades. If you have more teachers in the 35, 30 teachers in a building, those things just simply don't influence the grade of the school as much. I don't like that. It's not my favorite process, but it's a reality we have to consider. I almost glossed over that, sorry. And again, we mentioned this, but not being fiscally responsible with the use of the building itself or district resources to maintain that building. I will tell you this, and Brian, you let me know if you want to go a different direction with this. In my experience, there's a couple things to remember. You close a building or close a school because it saves a lot of money. Just closing a building is not the issue. Because remember, those teachers, or the number of teachers, follow the students. Not those exact teachers perhaps go where those exact students go, although oftentimes they do. But the same number of teachers, we still need those. So the teachers typically aren't losing positions, they're following the same number of students. So then we have a building to maintain. You can save money on utilities and upkeep, although some of the upkeep still has to be done. What happens to a building, that's up to, or the property. Everyone assumes that, hey, the district just wants to close the school, to sell the property, to get the proceeds, and that would help. I can tell you in my experience, that's not the case. Districts are hesitant to let go of properties. If a board ever does decide, in Utah anyway, the law is that the municipality where that building resides gets first right of refusal. So you can't just go to the open market and say, hey, what developer wants to give the most money? It's just not the way it works. Most municipalities want to do that. But again, I'm not speaking for Salt Lake City School District on this issue. I'm telling you in general what my experience has been with schools around the state. When they do close or shutter a school, you'll oftentimes see a district use other district programs in a building like that because those are needed. Community programs, there might be lease options for other community programs. Sometimes I've seen districts that do raise or demolish a building and then keep it for green space or a park or lease it for a while to a municipality. There are all kinds of great options, and communities need buildings for things. So, but I have not seen, rarely, especially in this state, is a closure and then it just becomes a public nuisance or unsightly, broken windows, and it attracts people, activities you don't want. Those are liabilities for districts, so you typically don't see that. And I want to be clear about that because I get that question all the time. I'll try to go a little faster. Remember, there's 7 board members and each represent a precinct in Salt Lake City. Okay, that's an area that they represent. And the reason I think that's important is every district's a little different, whether you call them a board member or a trustee or areas. Precincts, remember, are based on total population. And every 10 years, every district, typically around the country, but I know in our state, has to re-examine their precinct areas and adjust precinct based on population. You have to adjust precinct boundaries. So you'll see this. But I wanted you to understand, because some people say, well, why not do boundary studies or closure studies based simply on board members' precinct? Let's just do that precinct. Well, there's too many overlapping factors, feeder patterns, to geography, to other areas. So because of that, you'll see, well, you're going to see simply, of course, just where the elementary and high school are on this map. Area 1, the district has broken the Salt Lake City School District up into 4 geographic general areas. And I say general because there could be sometimes you'll see overlap between a major road here or a couple of blocks here and there. But area 1, 2, 3, 4. And is there overlap sometimes even within outside of, again, those 4 areas? You certainly may. I don't know your boundaries quite as well as some, but you will certainly see some overlap. Quickly with each one. Now Davis demographics, Brian, did Davis demographics again do a study years ago?
2017.
2017. The nice thing about a company like Davis Demographics or one of the K-12 demographic companies is you want somebody like that to come in and give you data. Because one, quite frankly, and they'll tell you right up front, they don't care about the politics of the area or your emotions or anything else. They're just giving you data. And they're not from Utah, or they can just give it to you and say, here you go. Now you guys have to make the harder decisions. But what they do is a district will give a company like that or a consultant like that the data and say, again, our goal is to get 3, 4, maybe 5 teachers at grade level. That means we're trying to get somewhere between 500 and 550 students per building. Based on that, what do you recommend that we do? And that's simply really what this area 1, there are currently 7 schools. And the number of students enrolled versus how many residing in that area. So basically with 7 schools, if that was the goal, to get to that minimum, then they say, oh, gosh, and the funny thing is, you know what, they don't just say, they don't round. They don't say it's 4 schools or 5 schools. Well, you should have 4.18 schools if you're K-6, based on 550. If you're doing the residing students, you should have 4.4 schools. It's not what the district has to do. It's not what the board has to do. It's a recommendation. And it says, again, based on the number of students you want, based on the number of buildings you have, they say, here's your number. Now, you guys do the hard work and figure out what you want to do there. So that's area 1, number of schools versus a goal, or I don't even know if I should say goal, a possibility. Let me strike that, not a goal. I'm not speaking for anyone, but a possibility. That's what a consultant has said. Area 2, similar. Again, K-5, school feeding to Glendale Middle. This is the only area with all K-5.
All except Franklin.
So that's
Yeah,
right.
all the others.
Gotcha. Okay. So based on that, you can see the recommendation currently with 5 schools, going to go down to 3 schools.
Yeah, so 3 to 4 schools if they stayed K-5. If those schools went to K-6, then obviously schools would be bigger.
Or could they remain at 5? Maybe there's something in those 12 other factors, 20 other factors. Say, you know what, that's nice. The numbers are nice, but that doesn't include really what we value and what we want. Area 3, same. Simply looking at 7 schools. And simple math, all they're doing is how many students per building. Okay? And I really don't want to, I'm not trying to necessarily zoom through this, but if you want me to stop, I will, or I'll come back to it. I want to make sure we get this and get this back to questions. Okay?
Important thing about this last area, 3 of those schools are magnet ELP. So you're going to see difference in the number of residing versus number enrolled. You can see there's quite a difference.
3283 versus how many live in that area or reside in that area. So yeah, in other words, they're coming from outside of the area to come to those special programs. Yeah, that has to be taken into consideration. Okay. What the board said was not just an overall blanket statement for the entire district, but study all the elementary schools in area 1 for potential boundary change with possible closures. Same thing in area 2, area 3. Important here, I'll talk about the process in just a second, but we're not talking about this fall in 3 months. We're talking about potential, possible, maybe something does happen, most likely to be implemented in fall of 24, not too soon, not this fall. This is that timeline. I'll go through this again. I tend to want to spend. Yep. Like a school year, you never really stop. You start preparing for 1 year, 6 to 8 months before the next year begins. So school district started preparing for next fall, last fall almost, but months ago, especially in the spring. Well, the boundary study process is similar to that, where you have to start a year or more in advance. So typically what you'll see is last fall, somewhere between about Brian, correct me if I get this wrong, but somewhere between last summer and this past Christmas, where you're getting ideas, you're understanding your communities. You're as the options committee in the district, the cabinet, the board, are gathering information to consider ideas, areas to study, and to kind of vet those ideas. Then you get to early January, February, where a board will typically make a decision. Yes, options committee, we like those ideas. Let's make a decision to begin a study. And that study will last for about a calendar year, not a school year, but about a calendar year. Where you start early in the calendar year, January, February-ish. Again, districts are a little different, but I believe in my conversations with Sully District, it starts early in the year, and it will conclude typically November, December with board action. In between that this is where it is now. This is part of the process. This is March to May. So staff, typically Brian, or, we're gonna, again, this is so hard. But
We are gonna, I'll be a couple weeks behind this March through May. We'll go into the first couple weeks of June. But I anticipate being caught up, when you see the next slide that starts with August, we should be caught up by then with what's happening on the timeline. So I think by August, we'll be caught up. And what you see for August, September, October, November, is what you're gonna see there.
I was gonna say, Brian, there is a copy of that timeline over here on the desk you can take if you like it.
Okay, thank you.
this, by the way, with the other community meetings, please grab those. I think we're also close to the process.
Is it possible to see the suggestion of the schools again and what they recommended?
As
To
far
reduce
as
it to?
specific schools that are,
Just the 4 areas.
I can go back to,
So we put a slide after this one.
Or 8 to, right?
Yeah,
No,
sorry.
the ones we, yeah. I just wanted to see how many schools they wanted to reduce it to.
and again, I want to be very clear and careful. When I say
It's a
they,
recommendation, but
not the district they, but this was
the study.
kind of a consultant's idea.
Go back one
Simple
more,
math.
this is if they
Yeah.
were K6, this is if they were K.
So like
Okay.
the area 1 had 7 and they wanted to go to 4.8 rate. So
And
that's
this
what I
will be
wanted to
on the
know.
website, correct?
Yeah.
This PowerPoint will be,
This will be.
I can help clarify that, Kai, sorry, yeah, Liddy Chatler, district also. What you see here, this map is, you described earlier that there's kind of an ideal, like a spot for what a school should look like, enrollment, brigade, et cetera. So if we're looking at that ideal school, that's what this is like. If it was kind of 26, these are the numbers. This is not necessarily a board recommendation, this is just if we're looking at what the best practices can be. That's what they would be. The board recommended studying all the elementary schools for possible boundary change and closure. They did not recommend going down to specific number of schools or, go down by this or anything like that. They just said study all of it.
yeah. And I
So-
think the other big takeaway from this, if we go back, if the big takeaway is, again, there's nothing magical about where the black lines are. It could have been 3 more blocks this way or whatever. I think the big takeaway is we don't have anywhere in our city where there's a concentration of way too many kids and way too few students. It's kind of true of the whole district. It isn't like, hey, we just have to get fewer schools in area 1. We need fewer schools. It isn't that at all. It's saying area 1, you might need 1 or 2 fewer schools. Area 2, you might need one or two. Every area, it's like maybe we need 1 or 2 fewer schools in multiple spots, not just in one spot. So I think that's a huge takeaway of why we wanted to break it down and look at it this way too.
Did they also in their study go over like which schools they thought they could combine so that things would
This
flow?
was just simply
No.
math problems.
Yeah, okay,
Number
they
of
didn't get that
schools.
far.
You're trying to get to an approximate number, consider it this way. Yeah, so no, not that. In fact, great question, I'm glad you're saying that, the chance to say again, no decisions have been made whatsoever. This is information gathering. I think I'll say this, I think I'm safe saying this, and if not, you guys help me out. But typically, these processes are best to say, just like the district here, they did say, the board said with this. This is almost saying, let's start with just everything. Let's put everything on the table. Let's study it all. Now, as soon as we can, and that's typically in the process over the summer, where we get some initial feedback, and then over the summer, start to whittle that down. Take things off the table, some of the more obvious things. And then in the fall, we can narrow that down. That's typically, I'm not speaking for the board, typically where you'll start to hear names of specific schools. So that then you come back out, talk to the communities and say, okay, this is getting more specific. Let's talk about what some of these options are.
Could but I did see those numbers though, the 4.18 and the 2 point, this one is for area 4, 5.97.
Area two,
Yeah.
or go area two.
Yeah, I got the 4.8, 4.18. I just wanted to see. those numbers.
After that, you might go into area 3.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's area two.
That's only if they became K six, which.
Oh, these are
That's
two
only if
different
those same
numbers.
schools were K six
Oh.
instead of K five. That's all.
Yeah.
Here's area three.
Area three,
6. Okay.
Of course, there can't be 4.14 schools.
Right.
More realistically, it would be 5 or 6.
You just said prior slide.
That's all right. Yeah. Thank you.
so again, timeline. Big picture now, information gathering now. Try to refine that, try to narrow it down to focus over the summer. Come back in the fall, early fall, I don't know the exact timeline for but early fall, so then we can come back and say, hey, yeah, we're looking at certain areas and certain school perhaps at this point. And then by typically November or December is when you'll most often see a board make a decision. I've seen boards say, you know, the decision is no decision perhaps. We don't do anything. Up to, hey, yeah, we're considering we're going to close these schools. Again, with implementation being the following fall. Fall of 24. So, okay. I can start over. I can't start over. Okay. So again, this goes into more detail and simply the meetings. Here we are. Here we are tonight. We have meetings over the next tomorrow, Thursday, next week at different locations. That's all on these flyers. Please look at those. This process can't happen, shouldn't happen without valuable input. All that data, all those math problems, I'll call them, is just that. It's data. People in Salt Lake City School District can give us data. Consultants can give you numbers. What no one knows, unless you live here, work here, understand this community, is the nuances and the things that this meeting will bring out. Steve, Brian, superintendent, whomever, board, do you understand this about our community? And this is a concern for us. We want to make sure that all that information gets to not just us, but to the board. That's how you do that. That's how you do that. Please go to, and again, this is just to slcsschools.org, correct? SLC, sorry, slcschools.org.
Yeah, when you see population and boundary study, there's that little green button. When you click on that, it takes you to the page right here. And it says, send us your comments. You can do it in English or Spanish. And those are shared, those are compiled and shared with the board members. We compile them based on this coming, here's the ones coming from parents, here are the ones coming from teachers, here are the ones from precinct 1, here are the ones from precinct 2. So it's compiled in different ways, but all of the board members, it isn't just going to your board member, it's going to all 7.
I think that's important. I'll tell you this, is my experience with these two is that I encourage people to be honest. Sometimes they're brutally honest to the point of being personal, so don't take it personally if you see that. But I've tended to leave some of those very personal comments up, take names out, but I just want everybody to see, the kind of things that are there. But please be that conduit, be that advocate for your community, whether you're a patron, a teacher, or you just live in the community and you don't have or never have had children in the area, but you're a concerned citizen about your community. Please give us your input. This is all stakeholders, regardless of status. So, questions? What other questions?
So is there a reason why some of these programs, like the EOP program, are hyper concentrated in area 4 rather than 3?
I don't know the history there. I might have to lean on Brian for that one. Why more of those programs
I mean,
are
obviously, it's
concentrated in
pulling
one
people
area?
to other areas.
And I don't know if that's a question that you can answer tonight or if you,
Yeah, but I'm right question for our board to
I
hear?
I
Yeah,
would highly recommend literally putting that in writing and asking. So if there's evidence that, hey, I wanna know this, let's find out. I have no idea, I'm gonna step again and say, I've seen in other districts where things evolve, they happen over years. I'm guessing that all didn't happen at one time, and they kind of evolve over time. Then you look up one day and somebody asks the question, why are all those programs in one area? Then somebody says, find out. Fantastic question. What else?
Are we taking questions or somebody comments?
Either.
Okay, no, so I have a couple comments I'd love to share. I appreciate you coming out and sharing this, and coming into the community to do it. This is a good spot for obviously the library. And I just want to recognize that these are really tough decisions for everyone involved. There's a lot of factors. I appreciate that conversation. The one thing I want to start with is I'm a little concerned with this rapid series of meetings. I know it's probably been on the website for a while, but a lot of people have not heard about it. And I just saw some parents passing it around today saying, oh, we can't really make it. It takes a long time for people to get time off work and make it to these things. So I'm really worried that a lot of voices that maybe aren't, that necessarily find it that easy to jump online, or work evenings aren't going to be able to make it. So I think there are opportunities for the district, for whoever, to work with some of the community organizations around here to really have a lot of roots in the community to get that kind of input, in addition to these kind of general meetings that are put out. And I just worry that a lot of input is not going to happen. Personally, a few things I'll say, just knowing parents. I'm the SCC chair at Parkview. So, I have my own feelings about schools, but I'm not going to jump too much into that. That list of concerns that were up there that need to be taken into account, the one I would add, it's probably not a lot, one I would add is just saying I think equity needs to be right at the center of all these decisions, in the sense that in the past there have been decisions that are made sort of purportedly to be the same across the district, but they end up disproportionately harming the West Side schools, Title I schools that need to have more things in place in order to be successful. And this could be this is an opportunity to address equity and get resources where they need to be. It could also end up going the other way. So I could see a few examples. For example, if schools in Section 4, because they have the ELP programs, get fewer schools closed and other ones closed, that's just building off the fact that the East Side has gotten all the most of the ELP programs, the West Side hasn't. And I happen to know there have been years of people pushing to have ELP on the West Side, and there's a lot of pushback. So here's a chance where this could just reinforce those inequities, or we could say, hey, we need to close some of these schools, and we need to move some of these ELP programs so they're actually accessible to more people. I think.
I'll raise stuff so far, keep going.
Okay. Sorry, I have a few more, and I'll get off. One of the big pushes, when I think about closing some schools, I think for that to be, I think, as you said, it could be an opportunity to bring more resources to those schools. So a lot of parents right now have been pushing for social workers and therapists in all of our schools. Huge need. I think if parents see that we consolidate some schools and then are adding these additional people who can bring those resources, that's going to be a different conversation than if it's just, wow, we saved some money and the custodian lost their job and this principal isn't working anymore and all schools feel the same. So really thinking about where do those resources go and how are they concentrated, so we're going to close the opportunity gaps that we struggled with for so long, as with other districts. And then I really was excited by the conversation about what could be done with the land. I would definitely say that if a few schools are closed, I do think thinking about what are amenities that are really in need. For example, sports fields that could be used by community organizations for free, indoor space for community organizations. And then I know that this one other burden I think we really need to watch out for is that this doesn't increase the already really huge burden of transportation from west to east for any students who want to go to, for all of our Glendale students going to high school already have to travel across there. If they want to go to the ELP program, this could make that worse or better. And then if we're closing some of these schools, there's also a huge push in the neighborhood to get a high school. So We're not, so we have a local option for students, and I would think about that land and whether that land could be used for a project like that, possibly for housing, or there's a lot of ways the land could be really exciting and show people that this is still an investment in the community, even if we're losing some specific schools.
Wonderful, every one of these. I hope we got that word for word. But please put all of that in writing and send them in. Those are all great conversations to have.
And I think I captured it pretty well right here too, but I heard the same.
And I think I'll just say in summary that you're right, what you said in the beginning. It's this. My experience is no perfect solution for any of these. You look at all of these, you have tough conversations. Guys, the board is very difficult. They have some difficult things to look at. Hard conversations to have and hard decisions to make. Because regardless of the options committee and whether we have 5 or 500 people and get great feedback, it's not a perfect solution. But I think all of those things are taken into consideration to make better answers than maybe. Let's take what we have and just confront those brutal realities and where we are, and take all that information, combine it, and again, the data's nice. Everything you just said, reminders that you just gave, shows how difficult this process can be, and necessary. Most things that are this important are not easy. Not just. I can tell you that, again, been doing this almost 10 years, and I was naive. As a former principal for 17 years, I just thought, oh, I get to play puzzle pieces. I get to move this block of students over here and move this one over here. We even these schools out. Voila, I love a good puzzle. No, it's just not that simple. There are so many things that have to be considered. And it's not easy. People make decisions, first of all, based on the school, where they live. The decisions the board makes impacts all of those. Job, where they live, the babysitting, I live there because of that school, or something close to that school. These are real life decisions, real life, very tough decisions. So kudos to the board for taking this on. You know, I've said over and over, I grew up in Tennessee, and sometimes as I get nervous or going, you might hear my accent come out more and more. And so, hear the accent. But my dad, he was classic. He always had these sayings, and they weren't his own, but they come up with some good ones. And when he would talk about these situations where you have, like this one, I think, data versus, quite frankly, emotion, and both are legitimate. He said that's like bringing a calculator to a knife fight. Data, typically, it's very difficult, even though your data is solid and all the numbers say the right things. You also have the emotion of the event. And think about, not too personal, but your personal relationships, whether it's a spouse or friend or someone, and you're having a hard conversation with them, and you have all the data. You say, look, this kind of proves my point. And emotion comes back at you, that gets hard. But that's kind of a microcosm of what this is. Hard conversation, tough decisions.
So I guess just to support a lot of the points that he made very well. For us personally, our children, we're closer actually to one elementary school. We started out with our kids in that elementary school. We were disappointed, honestly, to hear the lack of a lot of programs, it seemed like, compared to other schools. The other thing that became more apparent over the years is that we were getting feedback from even teachers that were expressing concern that the district wasn't giving them the support. And ultimately, after, our kids have been going through for 3 or 4 years, because of our concerns that it was going to jeopardize the education of our children, we moved them to another school, also in the district. So we have concerns from a lot of different points here. There was a lack of dual immersion program, no ELP, the just general teacher support was of concern. There was a move, it seemed like, at one point where the district was trying to do something and convert it to a district building without getting good input from the community. All of these things that seemed like the parents, the community, they weren't getting included in the decision. So beyond finding a place for our kids too, we're also concerned about that building because we're close to it. If that were to turn into multi-unit dwellings, we're already getting drowned out by all of these buildings that are going up everywhere. And the kids need a place to play. The community, the green space is important. So all of these points that have been made, they're real concerns too.
Well said. All those things. I'll step aside.
Well, yeah, and if people want to stick around and talk a little bit afterwards, we'll close the official meeting and be done with that part, but, yeah, we're happy to stick around and just hear or talk or, and know also that we are, I've made it to about 2/3 of the elementary schools SEC meetings, to talk to principal, SEC chair, SEC members. Principals should be sharing information with their staff members. So we're trying to get this out in a couple different ways over the last, my injury did condense these meetings and I apologize for that because I'm the one who wrecked my bike. No one else did. Car didn't hit me. It was my own fault. So, but we're trying to play a little bit of catch up and there will be even more opportunities through the district website to share your firsthand comments, questions with board members, but also early in the fall we'll have more meetings and I'll be in a better place to be able to have conversation with others as well.
Even though the numbers are relatively few here, please go back out to your communities and be advocates. Tell people what you saw and heard, encourage them. Take a few extra flyers, hand them out, tell them where the website is, so we can build some momentum to get more and more input throughout the process.
So once the board makes a decision and decides to look further into which schools will close, or even if they want any schools to close, then they will have more feedback from the community, like at the meetings as well.
Yes.
Okay.
Fall. Early in the fall.
Those would be a little more live.
Those would be once they start getting names.
That's okay. And of course, because things seem pretty broad right now, we're just talking numbers
Yeah,
and
we're just
big picture stuff. But sure, see for school up there. Again, that's okay. I would rather you be emotional a little bit about this than apathetic. I'd rather have an auditorium of highly passionate, emotional people than no one show up. So that's fine.
And when you come back in the fall, are you planning on discussing beyond just the closure of the building, what's going to happen, or what you're suggesting is going to happen with that land?
I'll have to defer to the board. I can only tell you, and I'm stepping away, and I'm not speaking for the district at all, but typically boards, they can sit on that for a while, they can make a decision, they may know, but most of the time they're not going to know. When they announce the closure of the school, most boards don't know what they're going to do with that land. Sometimes that can take weeks, months, I don't know.
I will say this, we have neighboring districts that have been at this for 20 plus years, a cycle of what you just saw here. This is our maiden voyage of doing it this way. Before it's been, oh, maybe we should close that school, or let's close it, over the last 25 years, it's been Lowell, Roslyn Heights, and Benyon have been the three schools I'm aware of that have been considered for closure. 2 of those 3 happened over a 25-year period. But it wasn't systematic, it wasn't systemic. So I think this is a steep learning curve for our board members. Well,
One reminder too, this isn't just Salt Lake City School District. All school districts are now probably for the next 10, 15 years, based on demographic trends, are gonna struggle with this issue. And that is Alpine District, huge growing district, have considered closing 5 or several schools. Jordan District, all that huge growth out in Harriman, they're still closing, need to close schools, almost all districts. Even if you're a growing district, you might have an older building, your population shifts to a different part of your district. So it's not just this district. Granite's in the same position. So, and in Utah, you're seeing this more so where the population is the oldest, and that is along the bench. So Davis County along the bench, Salt Lake County, bench, Utah County along the bench. Because that's where people first settled, the oldest homes. And by the way, I hear all the time too, hey, that means the people are getting older, they'll move out, young people will move in. Sort of, but not necessarily, because birth rates are down, and even if birth rates weren't down, you typically never generate the same number of students per building you had in the area before. It's just not happening. So you're lucky, fortunate to regenerate 50 to 60% of the students you had in the area, even if it does come. The birth rates being what they are, charter schools, other issues. By the way, open enrollment. We're an open enrollment state. Because it would be easy just to draw some lines on the map and make those numbers fit and say, hey, you go here, you go here. Some states do that. But we're an open enrollment state. You can choose, for the most part, where you want to go to school, assuming there's capacity. So that's a consideration. All those.
I have a quick question. So I'm gonna miss this part of the meeting, but is it looking like all over the state that there's that school population going down? So is it just is it pretty much just in the city areas that it's happening?
Parts of the state, some more than others. So Salt Lake County in particular, Granite District, Salt Lake City School District, Murray, the oldest parts, more mature parts of the state will be impacted. But like I mentioned, Alpine has some of this. Every district in the state, because there are just issues that come up against shifting populations from part of the district to the other. Jordan District, I mean, all that growth down in the southwest part of the valley increased by new schools every year.
right, they couldn't open schools fast.
Couldn't open them fast enough, yet they still had a couple of schools that they had to consider because they don't live there anymore. That population has shifted. So this isn't,
I'm sorry.
I just say this is not unique to this district, but you're seeing it not just in the state, but all over the country.
I'm sure you've answered this question before, and it's just more economical to shut down schools in one place and build another area, or is it just bury them to that school, to that pre-existing school?
It can be, again, based on a lot of those factors that were listed up there. I mean, if you have a school that's 90 years old, it's just not efficient for schools or students anymore, not ADA accessible, have a lot of the things you get, can or have built another school in your area. Yeah, those are, again, not easy decisions, but some districts say, and some patrons say, wait a second, if we need to shut schools down, why are we building new schools? Honest question, great question. No simple, easy answer to that. Sometimes those are justified, I've seen, and perhaps sometimes they're not, but each district has to answer that. Anything else?
Steve, thanks for talking so much.
You guys are ready? Hope to see you at some of the other meetings.
Sorry to hear about your accident.
Yeah, the timing was off.